So I wanted to make this quick video to show that after doing 20 minutes of self-dialogue, even though I haven't done it in a couple weeks, in terms of referring to my notes, I wrote this, and this so far in editing that bit of video. So it seems like this process does turn on this other type of learning process. Learning through having insight, and one can have insights through one's insights. And I think this is actually the part that activates this other area of the brain. It's the dialogical area of the brain. Dialogical sector of the brain. And insight is light nutrition from perception, from seeing into something. So it seems it really is a hyper-learning state. And when it first gets turned on, we're learning all these things, but then it comes to a point where we're learning these things about the me. But the me is an illusion, a scary illusion, so it can be scary. But this hyper-learning state, it's learning about consciousness and the capabilities and capacities of consciousness, not just this limited me structure. That's part of it. And there's this element of getting to the place of seeing beyond that. Doesn't mean that nothing scary ever comes into play, but one doesn't have to be afraid of this hyper-learning process that can be called mania. But it can go into that more, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but what I'm trying to get at is that there is no me there. The ego is an illusion, but when we first get in contact with this hyper-learning, there's learning about this ego illusion. But then when we get past that, then we're able to learn and prune our brains in a more intelligent way. So there's an intelligence that sort of purges a lot of that from our system. It seems like this could be one of the reasons why I haven't really gone into a mania, is because I've been in this hyper-learning state, which could go into a mania if I sort of decided to cling on to something and go with it. There's that importance of dropping the thing which one learned and not really believing it. Not turning what we learn into a belief, because if we do that, then we're back in the whole level of the ego that believes things. We don't need to believe things when we're always learning. As soon as we believe something, it blocks the learning, and it turns the process into there's this I there, there's this me there that believes something. And interestingly enough, even in just doing this few minutes of self-dialogue and a few minutes of editing, I think my face looks different. And I talked about that before, how I look different in a scary way a couple weeks ago. And in my last video, I felt like I look kind of just bloated, and my face was having trouble speaking words, but just these few minutes of getting back into the dialogue process, I feel like my face can move again. I feel a little bit more connected to something. And it makes sense. This makes total sense to me right now. I feel like the dialogue process that we have innate in our brain is part of beauty. Because we're meant to communicate in a dialogical way, not in this egoic and divisive way. And I feel this is very transformative, actually. Can't really put my feeling on camera, but I'm not sure if one can notice this video I'm making like half an hour after editing the last one. I think I look different. My face feels different. So that brain state doesn't necessarily disappear. It doesn't disintegrate. But if it's not in dialogue, then it sort of turns off. But we all have this brain state of dialogue. It's just a different way of communicating. So this is kind of cool that this happened, because if I wouldn't have stopped the dialogue process and then thought, I'm just going to see if I can fire up my brain a little bit by talking about a few things in my notebook. And I just was reading through and I picked a page and I just went with it. And my brain already feels more intelligent. And it could be important to engage the brain in self-dialogue until we get more of a dialogue going with each other. And maybe when we get this dialogue going, we won't need to talk so much about our symptoms and our problems. And I allowed myself to go into that mode. I allowed myself to go into the mode of, I'm going off my meds and I'm just going to talk about how I'm doing with that, which is related to transcending the system. But by doing that, in a way, I put myself in a weaker state. And I didn't realize that until now. And it could be too that intelligence wants to speak through the brain. And when it does, it's not me as an ego speaking. It still sounds like me, but it's a different quality. Just a different quality of sound. It's like playing sound through an old ghetto blaster, playing sound through some high quality speakers. Could be the same song, just different quality. Sounds better. And these are all things I've talked about with myself through this process, and then it's only now that I really stopped that process and then just gave it a little bit of a jump start that I'm seeing. And this isn't for sure. I'd have to keep going a couple days to see if my brain goes back into that mode. And it was getting a bit annoying to be writing so much down, and I think I learned that this process isn't about me. It's a process that wants to happen. And I all of a sudden made my life about me by making it about me coming off my meds and not continuing the dialogue with myself. Like I mentioned before, even David Bohm's book on dialogue said, if there's no one to have dialogue with yourself. And I'm seeing the importance of that now. It's interesting, I feel way different right now than I did before this video today. And I guess I feel different because it's not the me, it's not that level of energy. And so getting to a different level of energy could just be speaking as something else, speaking about and as something else other than the ego self, having a different dialogue. I feel like my face has transformed. And maybe that's why my face really morphed out of how it was, because before I was fine, and in this time of not speaking with myself in the dialogue way, I feel like my face just turned into this different face. And that makes sense with what I talked about with the tensions of the ego. There's probably ego tensions in the face as well that disappear as soon as one starts to dialogue from this other level. So yeah, self-dialogue, important brain nutrient to hear one's own voice speaking as something other than the ego. I think it erases the other. Look at this street, it's magical. I just returned my rental car, and now I'm walking back. It feels good to be out walking. Last night, something else I noticed after finishing self-dialogue for the night was that I felt like I had a lot of energy. I didn't feel tired anymore, whereas I spent part of the day laying in bed reading. It was almost a little more difficult to fall asleep because I felt so energetic. So I think there's something to this dialogical aspect of the brain. And it takes me a little while to wake up, so maybe after I get back, I'll do some self-dialogue. It's better than coffee. This is an insight on the go. I feel like the ego is just one channel of all the different TV stations that we can tune into. So we always have that one channel playing, but I was sort of thinking about that in terms of how when I was in that crisis in January, the stuff I was saying, it was like I was tuned into a certain channel and acting out based on that show, like that show that I was on at the time, which actually had nothing to do with the present moment, which is what TV is all about. It's a different story of another place and time. So I tuned into that and I was speaking as that. But there's so many other channels to tune into. The Jeeper Creeper likes jam. That funny little appendage right there. Look at his little hairs on his little antenna.